The necklace was not a sentiment. It was a prop, chosen carefully to complete her perfect bridal look for the show she was about to star in. She would look absolutely stunning when her world fell apart. The morning of the wedding, after I left my apartment, my first stop was not the venue. It was a diner a few blocks away. My best friend was already there, sitting in a booth, 2 coffees steaming in front of him. He looked at me in my tuxedo and shook his head. "Man, I still cannot believe you are doing this," he said, his voice low. "You do not have to, you know. We can get in the car right now and just go. Drive somewhere. No questions asked. You can just disappear." I slid into the booth across from him. I was touched. He was the only person who knew the full plan. I took a sip of the hot, bitter coffee. "I do have to do this," I said quietly. "But not for the reason you think. I am not doing it for revenge." He looked confused. "Then why put yourself through it?" I looked out the diner window at the people walking by. "Because if I just run, she gets to control the story. She gets to tell everyone I got cold feet, that I abandoned her. She and her work friend get to be the victims. They get to have a clean slate. I need everyone to see the truth. I need to look her in the eye when the mask comes off. I am not running away. I am walking out on my own terms, and I am taking the truth with me." He studied my face for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay, I have got your back. The car will be right outside the main doors when you are done." We finished our coffee. This was the last calm moment. My next stop was the wedding venue itself, a beautiful old chapel with gardens. I arrived early before the guests, before the chaos. I needed to see the wedding coordinator, a flustered woman with a headset, and more importantly, the technician running the sound and projector for the ceremony. I found him in a back room, a guy about my age, fiddling with wires. "Hey," I said, smiling. "You are in charge of the slideshow, right? For the reception?" He looked up. "Yeah, that is me." I pulled out the USB drive from my pocket, the copy. "I've got a little surprise for my bride," I said, my voice dropping to a conspiratorial tone. "A special slideshow. A gift. I need you to play it at a very specific time during the ceremony." I slipped him an extra $200 in cash, folded neatly. "Play it exactly when I give you the signal." A big thumbs up from me at the altar. "It is really important." The tech guy took the money and the drive, a wide grin spreading across his face. He thought he was part of a romantic gesture. "You got it, man. That is awesome. She is gonna love it." I smiled back. "I hope so." That was the point of no return. The trap was set. All I had to do was walk into it. I went to the groom's waiting room, a small, book-lined study at the side of the chapel. I could hear the guests starting to arrive, the murmur of voices, the rustle of fancy clothes. My best man came in looking pale. "Dude, this is really happening," he said, adjusting his bow tie nervously. "You ready?" I straightened my own tie in the mirror. I have never been more ready. There was a knock on the door. It was the wedding coordinator. "5 minutes," she chirped. We walked out and took our places at the front of the chapel, standing next to the officiant, a kind-faced older woman. The guests were all seated, a sea of expectant faces. Soft music began to play. The doors at the back of the chapel opened, and there she was, my fiancée. She was a vision in white, her dress breathtaking, her hair perfect, the necklace I gave her sparkling at her throat. And on her arm, not her father, but her work friend. He was in a tuxedo, standing tall, looking for all the world like the proud groom. He was beaming. She was beaming with a triumphant joy that lit up the whole room. They began their slow walk down the aisle together. As they passed, I caught his eye. He looked right at me, and he gave me a small, quick, unmistakable smirk. It was a flash of pure arrogance. It was the final confirmation. This was not in my head. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he thought he had won. I kept my face blank, a mild smile on my lips. I watched them reach the end of the aisle. Her father stepped up and gave her a kiss on the cheek, then sat down, looking a little confused. The work friend positioned her carefully next to me, giving her hand a final pat before stepping back to stand with the groomsmen, as if he belonged there. The officiant smiled warmly at us and at the guests. She began to speak about love and commitment. I was not listening. My heart was a steady, slow drum in my chest. I was perfectly calm. The officiant went through the motions. Then she turned to the crowd and asked the traditional question. "Who presents this woman to be married to this man?" There was a pause. The work friend stepped forward, his chest puffed out. He looked at the officiant, then at the crowd, and said loudly and clearly, "I do." A few people gasped softly. Most just looked stunned. All eyes swung to me, waiting for my reaction, expecting shock or anger. I did not give it to them. I simply stepped forward, away from my place next to my fiancée. I did not reach for her hand. I reached for the officiant's small, wireless microphone. She looked startled but let me take it. I brought it to my lips. The sound system let out a quick, sharp squeal of feedback that made everyone flinch. And in that perfect, focused quiet, I began to speak. My voice, amplified and calm, filled the stunned chapel. "You all heard him," I said, looking out at the sea of frozen faces. "He said I do. So since he is so eager to take on the groom's traditional role, let us talk about what I do really means." I could feel my fiancée stiffen beside me. I did not look at her. I kept my eyes on her work friend, whose smug smile had melted into confusion. I gave a single, clear nod to the technician in the back. For a second, nothing happened. Then the large screen behind us, which was supposed to show soft pictures of us as a couple later, flickered to life. The first slide was massive, impossible to miss. It was a screenshot of the text message. Her words to him. My name, followed by that one terrible word. Placeholder. A wave of gasps rolled through the room. I heard her mother cry out. Oh no. I kept talking, my voice a steady, clear narration over the growing turmoil. It means taking on responsibilities, I said. I nodded again. The next slide appeared. It was a copy of the apartment lease removal paperwork, with my name officially taken off. The apartment lease? I have been removed from it for over a month. The landlord agreed it was a better financial risk to have her and her parents solely responsible. Another slide. The bank transfer records, showing the money I had moved to my own account. The joint savings account? Emptied, fairly, with my contributions returned to me. The money for the honeymoon is gone. Another slide. The credit card statements, the hotel receipt, the lingerie charges, all circled in red. The secret credit card debt, the fancy dinners, the romantic weekend getaways she told me were work trips. That is all hers now. I will not be paying for any of it. I finally turned to look at my fiancée. Her face was a mask of shock, her perfect makeup beginning to streak with tears of rage, not sadness. You built a whole secret life. I said into the microphone, my voice quiet but carrying to every corner. You just forgot to tell me I was only renting space in the one you showed me. The room was in an uproar. People were standing, whispering loudly, some moving to leave. Her father had his head in his hands. Her mother was staring at her daughter with a look of utter betrayal. I saw her mother stand up, her face pale. She did not look at me. She stared right at her daughter, her voice cracking as she spoke, not needing a microphone to be heard. You told me he was just a friend, she said, the words full of a pain that was deeper than anger. You looked me in the eye, and you told me not to worry. That seemed to break something in the room. The last shred of my fiancée's perfect image was gone, torn down by her own family. I had one more thing to do. I reached into the inside pocket of my tuxedo jacket. I pulled out the small, black velvet ring box. I did not open it. I walked the few steps over to her work friend, who looked like he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. I held the box out to him. He just stared at it, not moving. Go on, I said, the microphone still picking up my voice. Take it. You're stepping into the role you were always meant to play, right? So here, he can have the wedding and the debt and you. I placed the box firmly in his limp hand. I closed his fingers around it. Inside that box, there was no ring. There was just a simple, folded piece of paper with my lawyer's contact information and a single, handwritten line, for the real soulmate. I turned my back on them. I turned my back on the altar, on the officiant who stood speechless, on the weeping and the chaos. I handed the microphone back to the officiant with a polite nod. And then I walked. I did not run. I walked slowly and deliberately down the same aisle she had just floated up, a path now littered with the shattered pieces of the illusion. Guests scrambled to get out of my way, some looking at me with pity, others with horror, a few with a dawning understanding. I kept my eyes forward, my posture straight. Every step I took felt like I was reclaiming a piece of myself that had been lost. The weight that had been on my shoulders for months was gone. I felt light. I felt clear. I pushed open the heavy wooden doors at the back of the chapel, and the bright, real sunlight hit my face. It was a shocking contrast to the dark drama inside. My best friend's car was idling at the curb, just like we planned. I opened the passenger door and slid in, placing my small bag at my feet. He was gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles were white. He stared at me, his eyes wide. What the hell do we do now? He asked, his voice shaky. I looked straight ahead through the windshield, watching the normal world go by. People walking dogs, cars driving past, completely unaware of the explosion that had just happened in the chapel behind us. I felt a small, hard smile finally touch my lips. It was not a smile of joy. It was a smile of completion. Now, I said, my voice quiet and even, we wait for the lawsuit. As if on cue, my phone, which was in my pocket, began to vibrate. Then it buzzed again. And again. I pulled it out. The screen was a flashing storm of notifications. Missed calls from her mother, from numbers I did not know. Text messages were popping up one after another, a torrent of rage and panic and pleading. I did not answer. I just watched it buzz and light up in my hand, a little box of someone else's collapsing world. The game I had been forced to play was over. I had walked off the field, but the consequences, the legal and emotional fallout, that was just beginning. I had my lawyer. I had my evidence. I had my freedom. I put the phone face down on my leg. Drive, I said to my friend. He put the car in gear and pulled away from the curb. I did not look back. Not once. I just watched the chapel grow smaller in the side mirror until it disappeared around a corner, gone for good. The rest of my life was a blank page in front of me, and for the first time in a long time, I was the only one who got to write it. The phone on my leg finally stopped buzzing, giving up for now. I knew it would start again. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today I was free. The first few days after the wedding, that was not a wedding, were a strange kind of quiet. I stayed at my best friend's place, sleeping on his couch. The world I had left behind was exploding, but in my little bubble, there was peace. My phone did not stop buzzing, but I let it go to voicemail. The voicemail box filled up. I listened to a few. Her voice was ragged, first with fury, calling me every name she could think of, then shifting to a desperate, tearful pleading, asking how I could do this to her, telling me I misunderstood everything. Then came the threats. She said she would sue me for theft, for emotional distress, for ruining her life. Her mother left a message, her voice cold and formal, telling me I was a coward and that her family's lawyers would be in touch. Her work friend even left one, his voice tight with anger, telling me I was a pathetic loser who could not handle a strong woman having friends. I saved them all. I sent them to my lawyer. She said they were helpful. She told me to keep doing exactly what I was doing. Nothing. Do not engage. Do not respond. Let them talk. Let them make threats. Their words were just more evidence of the chaos I had walked away from. My lawyer handled the official stuff. A letter came from her family's lawyer, full of big words and demands for money, claiming I had stolen from the joint account and sabotaged the wedding. My lawyer wrote back a very short, very polite letter. Attached were copies of the bank statements showing my deposits and withdrawals, perfectly legal. Attached was a copy of the apartment lease removal, signed by the landlord. Attached was a copy of the transfer document for the car, which she had actually signed a week before the wedding. Thank goodness for her distraction. My lawyer's letter basically said, try it. We heard nothing back after that. It seemed the threat of all that evidence going public in a courtroom was enough to make them think twice. The wedding was canceled, obviously. The venue kept the deposit. The caterer, the florist, the band, they all sent bills. Those bills went to her and her parents, since my name was on nothing. I heard through the grapevine, meaning my best friend heard from a friend of a friend, that her parents were furious with her. The perfect image of their daughter and the perfect wedding had blown up in their faces, publicly and expensively. They were stuck paying for a party that never happened, and they had found out about her secret debts. My friend said the family was in a civil war. I did not care. It was not my problem anymore. After a week on my friend's couch, I moved into my studio apartment officially. It was small and plain, but it was mine. I bought a bed. I bought a table and one chair. I put my clothes in the closet. It was not much, but it felt like a palace because it was all mine. No lies were hiding in the drawers. No secret messages were waiting on the couch. I could breathe. I started going back to work. It was awkward at first. Some people had heard rumors. Some gave me pitying looks. Others just avoided me. I kept my head down and did my job. It was a good distraction. The routine of it, the normalcy, was like medicine. I worked. I went home to my quiet apartment. I cooked simple food. I watched TV. I was putting myself back together, one boring, normal day at a time. About a month after the non-wedding, I got a certified letter. It was from my ex-fiancée's lawyer, but it was not a threat. It was a proposed settlement agreement. It was a document saying that if I signed it, we would both agree to walk away and never contact each other again. It said I would keep the money I had taken from the joint account, which was fair since most of it was mine anyway. It said she would keep the car and be responsible for the loan. It said we would both agree not to sue each other for anything related to the relationship or the broken engagement. It said we would both agree not to defame each other publicly. In other words, it was a truce, a permanent legal truce. I took it to my lawyer. She read it carefully. She said it was actually very standard and quite fair. In fact, it was in my favor. By signing it, I was getting a guarantee that she could not come after me later for any of the wedding debts or anything else. My lawyer said, "This is her family wanting this to go away. They want to bury it. They are offering you a clean break. I advise you to take it." I thought about it for a day. I thought about the word placeholder. I thought about the smirk from her work friend. I thought about the fake smiles and the secret debts. Then I thought about my quiet apartment and the peace I had found. I did not want to be tied to her in any way, ever again, not even through a court battle. I wanted it to be over. So I signed the papers. My lawyer sent them back. A week later, I got a copy with her signature on it too. It was done. Really truly done. That night, I sat in my apartment with my best friend. We ordered pizza and drank beer. We did not talk about her. We talked about stupid stuff, about movies, about work, about plans for the future. It felt normal. It felt good. When he left, I cleaned up the pizza box and the bottles. I looked around my little space. It was quiet. The phone was not buzzing. There was no tension in the air. There was just me. I had survived. I had gotten out. I had even won, in a way, by keeping my sanity and my self-respect. But as I got ready for bed, a question drifted into my mind, gentle but persistent. It was not about the past anymore. That was sealed away in a legal document. The question was about the future. I had been so focused on escaping, on planning my exit, on surviving the explosion, that I had not thought about what came next. Now what? The blank page of my life was in front of me, and for the first time, I realized I was not just free from something. I was free for something. But what? I did not have an answer. I turned off the light and lay in the dark. The city sounds floated in through the window. I was alone, but for the first time in a very long time, I was not lonely. I was just me. The guy who had promised to choose someone every day had finally learned to choose himself. The story of the wedding and the betrayal was over, closed like a book on a shelf. A new story was waiting to begin, and I was the only character so far. I fell asleep wondering who, or what, might turn the page.